My dog acted strange around my wife's gym buddy, so I followed them to see what was going on. A few days ago, my kid came to me and casually dropped a bomb. Told me about my wife having an affair with her special friend. I was in shock, but I needed proof, so I set up some cameras to catch her in the act. Well, life went on as usual after that. A few days later, my kids found this little bunny in the yard. They were so excited, begging us to keep it. But we've already got more pets than we need, and besides, it's a wild rabbit. You can't just bring those home. The bunny was big enough to survive on its own, so I gently explained to my kids that it really needed to go back to its family. They were pretty bummed out, but after some back and forth, they finally agreed to take it back where they found it. Thing is, I was swamped with work and couldn't go with them, so my wife took them instead. I specifically told her to release the bunny near the thorn bushes at the edge of our property, where it would be safe from predators. We live in the country, and hawks are always circling. Anyway, I went back to work, thinking that was the end of it. Not long after, my kids came flying back into the house, bawling their eyes out. My wife followed behind them, trying to calm them down, saying, "It's not that bad." I asked what the heck happened, and my oldest, through sobs, said that their mom made them release the bunny in the middle of the yard. Right after that, a hawk swooped down and snatched it up. They even described hearing the poor bunny scream. I was horrified. And then, honestly, I got pretty mad at my wife. She brushed it off, saying, "It's just a bunny. They'll get over it." But I couldn't believe she didn't listen to me. I had warned her about the predators, and now our kids had to witness that. They were devastated, locked themselves in their rooms, and refused to talk to her for days. Anytime she tried, they called her the bunny killer. I've tried to help smooth things over, but my kids are still upset. And truthfully, I'm still mad at my wife for the way she handled the whole thing. She's upset with me too, saying I should have had her back, that as husband and wife we should support each other. But we ended up arguing instead. I told her she hasn't exactly had my back in other situations, which made her cry, and she's been sulking in our bedroom ever since. Now I'm starting to feel like maybe I screwed this all up. A friend suggested I ask for some outside opinions, so here I am. Am I the asshole? Edit. I get it, hawks gotta eat too, and we've got plenty of them around here. But I didn't want my little kids, who are only 4 and 5, to see something like that. I grew up in the country, and my wife's from the city. When I was a kid and we caught some wild animal, we always tried to release it somewhere it had a fighting chance. Also, for the record, I never yelled at my wife. I called her out on her decision, sure, but I didn't raise my voice. Even later, when we argued, we whispered so the kids wouldn't hear us. I couldn't go with them to release the bunny because work had me tied down. I work from home half the week, and during those hours, I've got to stay close to the phone at all times in case I get a work call, except when I'm on my lunch break. That's why I couldn't go with them to let the bunny go. I also want to be clear, I never once called my wife the nickname our kids started using after the whole bunny incident. They've been calling her the bunny killer, and I've made a point to stop that nonsense every time. I would never call her something so cruel and degrading. It's disrespectful, and I'm not about to bully my own wife. Edit 2. Sorry for all the edits, but I need to clear this up. My kids weren't out in the yard unsupervised when they found the bunny. My wife, who's a stay-at-home mom, was right there with them. They came running back to the house with the bunny, and that's when I told them it needed to be released. Edit 3. I can't believe I have to explain this, but apparently, some folks are suggesting this story is just copied from some online video. I haven't seen that video, but I'm sure it exists. Hawks swooping down on small animals is pretty common, so why is it so hard to believe that this could happen to other people? It's not like I'm the only one with hawks flying around. My property is mostly flat, grassy land, about 4 acres of it, except for the house and 1 tree. We mowed the grass just last Sunday, so it was short when all this went down. That poor bunny was basically a sitting duck. I've had to deal with hawks for years, starting when I was a kid protecting baby chicks with my pellet gun. Hawks love little critters like that, which is why I specifically told my wife to release the bunny in the bushes. Edit 4. I'm seriously so tired of people saying things like, hawks gotta eat too, or circle of life. Farmers have every right to protect their animals from predators. When I was a kid, I wasn't just gonna sit back and let hawks swoop in and take our baby chicks whenever they felt like it. I was out there with my pellet gun guarding them. And no, I didn't actually shoot any hawks. I just scared them off. Yeah, I hit a few, but only enough to make them turn tail and fly away. I haven't fired at a hawk in 25 years, and even back then, I didn't enjoy shooting at anything alive. That was more my grandpa's thing. He was the one with the real guns, taking down hawks and coyotes when they threatened the farm. Look, hawks have no shortage of food around here. They're opportunists like most predators. That's why I wanted the bunny released in the bushes, to give it a chance. But like I mentioned earlier, I couldn't leave my desk, which some folks still don't seem to understand or just don't bother to read. Bailey the nerd, not the a-hole. To the people saying you're the a-hole because your wife didn't summon the hawk. It's not about that. You specifically warned her that predators were likely to go after the bunny when it was released. You saw this coming and she ignored it, which is why it happened. I'm not saying she murdered the rabbit, but she should be just as horrified that it all went down in front of your kids. She really needs to apologize for how things turned out. She didn't summon the hawk, but it sure sounds like she lives in a place where it didn't need any help showing up. Weena Fred, it's not just a bunny. And JB, you're definitely not the a-hole. If your wife wants any chance of regaining your children's trust and respect, she's going to have to own up to her mistake. She failed that bunny 100%. She needs to acknowledge that to your kids and accept the consequences of her actions. CAD DXT, not the a-hole. I get the whole idea of presenting a united front as parents, but this isn't a situation where your kids skipped their chores or got a bad grade. It's about nature, and witnessing something like that at a young age can be seriously traumatic. Trying to brush it off by saying, they'll get over it, is not okay. Sorry, but your wife is definitely the a-hole in this, and deep down I think she knows it. Otherwise, why would she be so angry? Ghostly fawn, not the a-hole. I understand its nature. There was always a high chance that bunny wouldn't have survived long, no matter where it was released. But letting it go in a safer spot like the bushes? That would have been kinder both for the bunny and for your kids. Nobody wants to see a little animal they've become fond of get snatched away. Avocado J. Am I the only one who laughed when I read that they're calling her the bunny killer? But seriously, I feel so bad for these kids. I'm super sensitive when it comes to animals, and if I saw something like that happen to a little bunny I was trying to take care of, I'd be traumatized. Not only did OP's wife ignore his perfectly reasonable instructions to protect the bunny, but now she's brushing off their kids' pain and grief. She needs to suck it up, admit that she messed up, and comfort her kids. We all make mistakes, but doubling down like she is? Come on, girl, get over yourself. Anyways, not the a-hole. It's one of those hard lessons about the way of life. As much as we try to protect ourselves from things like this, sometimes they're just inevitable. It's not your fault at all. This whole situation seems totally out of your control. Update. 7 months after the hawk incident, my wife cheated on me, without remorse, and ended up pregnant by her affair partner. I'm not sure if this is the right place to post, but I don't know where else to turn. For those of you who remember me, I'm the guy whose wife made our kids release a wild bunny in the middle of the yard, despite my warning to take it to the bushes. A hawk swooped in and took the poor bunny right in front of our children, who were 4 and 5 years old at the time. They freaked out and ran back to me in tears. After that, they started calling her the bunny killer. And honestly, that name feels even more fitting now after everything that's happened. Once her affair got out, other people started using that nickname for her too. What happened with the bunny feels like ancient history compared to what I'm dealing with now. I'm writing this as a free man, having finalized my divorce a couple of months ago. This story is long and messy, so brace yourselves. Oh, and for clarity, AP stands for affair partner. Sorry for not explaining that sooner. After the whole bunny incident, I showed my wife my original Reddit post. That did not go over well. She was furious and we had a huge fight over it. Afterward, she gave me the silent treatment for a week. Even though things were tense, I kept trying to get our kids to stop calling their mother the bunny killer. I put them in timeouts, gave them small groundings, but no matter what I did, the nickname kept coming back whenever they were mad at her. Eventually, after a couple of weeks, my wife eased up on her cold shoulder routine. She finally admitted she should have listened to me about the bunny and released it in the bushes like I said. She confessed that she didn't want to be wrong, so she was just defending herself. I accepted her apology and even apologized for putting the story on Reddit. I suggested we go to marriage counseling to work things out, but she flat out refused. She acted like there was nothing wrong with our marriage, and I didn't push it since things seemed to be getting better. But a few weeks later, everything changed in an instant. My oldest came to me and said she had something important to tell me. She admitted that she had been mad at her mom for more than just the bunny situation, but she was scared to say anything. I comforted her and told her she could trust me, that she could tell me anything. What she said next completely rocked my world. She told me that for months, Mama had been bringing a man over on Saturdays when I was at work. My wife called him her special friend. She had been bribing our kids to keep quiet about it, but my eldest realized that something was very wrong. My daughter spent some time working up the courage to tell me. Kids know things, they pick up on stuff real fast. It really bothers me when people dismiss that. I had already noticed my wife acting differently lately. She was snapping at everyone, especially the kids. I tried to talk to her about it when I showed her my original Reddit post, but instead of a conversation, she blew up on me. She insulted everything, my appearance, my character, my habits. She even dragged up stuff from way back, like the fact that I used to smoke. I quit over 10 years ago. After that, she locked me out of our bedroom and cried so loudly you could hear it throughout the whole house. So, when my eldest finally opened up to me, everything started to click. My wife was cheating, and her behavior reminded me of the mood swings she had when she was pregnant with both of our kids. Only this time it was even worse. After doing some research and talking to friends and a counselor, I found out this could have been caused by a combination of moodiness from pregnancy hormones and her guilt from the affair. I'm no expert in psychology, but it all seemed to make sense. I wanted to believe it was just a misunderstanding, but something told me I needed to know for sure. I ordered a few hidden cameras, making sure to have them delivered to my work so no one at home would know. Once I got them, I set them up one night when my wife went out for girls' night with her friends. It was surprisingly easy to hook everything up and connect the cameras to our Wi-Fi. Within hours, I could monitor the entire house from my PC at work or home. I worried I might be overreacting, thinking that if I was wrong, I could quietly take the cameras down and no one would ever know. But no, I wasn't wrong. My worst fears were confirmed in just the first week. The man my wife was having an affair with was someone I knew. He was a former colleague of hers, and I remembered him well. Whenever I saw them together at work events, they seemed pretty close. My wife had quit her job years ago to become a full-time mom after getting pregnant with our first child, which was something we both agreed on at the time. She had stayed in touch with her former coworkers, and they had been her best friends. But after this, those relationships have completely soured. Here's the kicker: her affair partner is about 10 years younger than she is. My wife had mentored him at her job, helping him take over her position when she left. The two of them stayed very close. My wife and I are both over 40 now, but you wouldn't know it just by looking at her. She's absolutely stunning and often gets mistaken for someone in her 20s. I guess she decided to use that to her advantage. After all this came out, I confided in my sister. About everything that was going on and showed her the footage I'd gotten from the nanny cams. She admitted she'd had suspicions for a while, and even told me she had seen my wife at a local bar with a guy who definitely wasn't me. She didn't tell me at the time because she wasn't sure. There was no kissing, but they were way too close with lots of touching on the shoulders and lower back. Since it didn't look like anything concrete, she didn't want to jump to conclusions and risk causing unnecessary drama. After hearing that, I decided to take things a step further. I ordered a GPS tracker, and once I got it set up, I hid it in the trunk of my wife's car. My sister and her husband were willing to help out, so they tracked her the next time she went out for one of her supposed girls' nights. But this time, she drove somewhere totally different, 20 miles away from where she usually went. There, she met up with the affair partner. My sister and brother-in-law watched from their car and noticed the guy kept rubbing my wife's belly while they were talking. They even recorded video of it. When I saw the footage, it all became painfully clear. My wife was pregnant, and it wasn't mine. She'd been so moody at home, And now I knew why. I was devastated. My sister and her husband had to calm me down because I was an emotional wreck. I felt the urge to drown myself in alcohol, but thankfully, my sister stepped in and reminded me that drinking would only make things worse. She was right. Not long after, I decided I needed a break from everything. I told my wife I'd be going on a business trip and took a leave from work. She was thrilled to hear I'd be gone for a while and didn't even try to hide her excitement. It hit me hard. Who was this woman? She wasn't the person I married almost 20 years ago. Did someone else just take her place one day? Is she some alien from a far-off land or something? The more I thought about it, the less any of it made sense. Eventually, I realized trying to make sense of it all wasn't going to help me. I still had cameras set up all over the house, and my sister and brother-in-law kindly offered to take the kids for a few days. My wife jumped at the chance, seeing it as the perfect opportunity. Just a few hours after I left, she called her affair partner, and he showed up that same evening to spend the night. I won't go into detail about what they did, you can imagine that for yourself, but what really got to me was the way they talked about me. They were openly joking about me, laughing at how clueless I was. Worse still, they talked about their baby and how they needed to figure things out before my wife's belly started to show. She was already over 3 months along by then, and there was no way she could pretend it was mine. The affair partner is a different race from me, so yeah, it would have been pretty obvious. It was going to be obvious from birth that the baby wasn't mine. But my wife just brushed off her affair partner's concerns, telling him they had months to figure things out. Then, as if it was nothing, she admitted this wasn't even her first affair. She told him she had slept with another guy when she was 29. I was floored. She went on to say she was sick of pretending to be the perfect housewife and tired of being around a boring man like me. She claimed I made her feel old, and if it weren't for my financial stability, she would have left me a long time ago. Even her affair partner seemed concerned about what would happen with our kids. Her response? He can have them. She didn't want to be around our children anymore because she thought they liked me better, and she was too focused on her do-over baby anyway. Hearing her talk so carelessly about our family, I almost threw my laptop across the motel room. I was disgusted, but somehow I kept my cool. I grabbed a few beers from a six-pack, ate dinner at a nearby diner, and then tried to distract myself with a movie. But when the movie ended, I just lay in bed, thinking for half the night before I finally fell asleep. I thought I knew my wife. I loved her and would have given her everything. But sometimes, people are just rotten, and you don't see their true colors until it's too late. That night, I made up my mind I was going to destroy her in the divorce. Normally, I'm a calm, kind guy, but if you push me far enough, I can become your worst nightmare. The next day, I went straight to a law firm and asked for the meanest divorce lawyer they had. We live in a no-fault state, but with all the evidence I had, my wife didn't stand a chance. The lawyer seemed a little hesitant at first since I wanted to move so quickly, but after I explained the situation and showed him some of the footage, he got this devilish grin. We shook hands, and he said he'd get to work immediately. He told me this was the kind of case divorce lawyers love to sink their teeth into. A few weeks later, the papers were served while I was working from home. The kids were at school, our eldest in kindergarten and the youngest in preschool. The sheriff delivered the papers right into my wife's hands, and my cameras caught the whole thing. The look on her face when she opened that envelope. She was terrified, but that quickly turned into rage. She came storming into my office, screaming at me, but I stayed calm and cool. By that point, I was completely checked out of our marriage. She wanted to argue, but I just told her I'd made up my mind. I wanted her out of the house. After all, I'm the only one who ever paid into the mortgage. She screamed that I couldn't do this, but I just sat there, unmoved. Then she did something I never expected. She threatened me. She said if I took her to court, she'd tell everyone I beat her and get me fired from my job. I just looked at her and told her to go ahead, make up whatever lies she wanted. It wouldn't change a thing. She was already planning to screw me over, being pregnant with her affair partner's baby and all. That caught her off guard. Her eyes went wide, and she asked me how much I knew. I simply said, I know enough, and told her again that I wanted her out. She refused, saying it was just as much her house as it was mine, then stormed off and locked herself in the bedroom. I watched her on the bedroom cameras. She had a full meltdown, pulling out her phone and calling the police. She was acting all panicked, but there was this big smile on her face while she did it. Honestly, she could have won an Oscar for that performance. If I hadn't already known she was a liar, I would have believed every word. I stayed calm, opened the front door, and waited for the police. When they arrived, they came in hot, ready for some kind of showdown. But they quickly realized the house was spotless. No sign of a struggle, no fight, nothing. My wife came running out of the bedroom, crying, grabbing one of the officers' vests, and screaming that I was some kind of maniac. I calmly asked one of the officers if I could show them some evidence of what was really going on, and thankfully he agreed. That wiped the smile off her face. She had no idea I'd been recording everything. I pulled up the footage on my laptop, starting with her threatening to ruin my life by making up lies. Then I showed them the footage of her running into the bedroom after our argument and calling the police, smiling the whole time while acting like she was in distress. I had it all recorded from multiple angles, and when she accused me of hitting her, the police could see for themselves there were no marks on her, and the cameras told a completely different story. I handed the officers a thumb drive with all the footage on it, and I told them it contained everything they needed to prove she'd called them under false pretenses. Even with all the evidence in front of her, my wife stuck to her story, insisting I was an abuser and that the recordings were illegal. But I calmly pointed out that the cameras were security cameras in my own home, which made them perfectly legal. In desperation, she looked at the police and begged them to do something. And they did. They put her in handcuffs. She started bawling like a child, completely falling apart right there. I just sat back, shaking my head in disbelief. This was once the woman I loved, the person I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. For so many years, I thought my wife was this wonderful, intelligent, and endearing person. Couldn't have been more wrong. As the police took her away, she was screaming that they couldn't do this to her, but she didn't put up much of a fight. Probably because she knew resisting arrest would just add to her problems. After that, I immediately shut down all the credit cards that were in my name and cut off any future payments to our joint bank account. If she wanted to bail herself out, she'd have to use her own money. Luckily for her, she had saved plenty while she was still working, and since the mortgage was only in my name, she wasn't broke. A day after she bailed herself out, she came back for her car. I'd already packed a few suitcases with her clothes and belongings and left the key on the front seat. There was no way I was letting her back in the house. Later, her parents came to talk to me, but they only had her side of the story at first, which, of course, was the same lies she told the police. Her father, big and strong despite his age, looked like he was ready to tear me apart. But when I asked if he knew about his daughter's affair and her pregnancy, his anger quickly turned to surprise. I explained everything to them and showed them the same footage I'd shown the police. Watching their faces as the truth hit them was heartbreaking. They were disgusted, completely blindsided by what their daughter had done. They apologized to me and promised they'd stay in touch to help with the kids. Then, right in front of me, they called my wife on speakerphone and confronted her about her lies. She tried to double down, but when they told her they were with me, had seen the recordings, and knew the whole truth, her story crumbled. They demanded she leave their house immediately. She tried to backtrack, but her parents weren't having it. They told her they didn't raise her to be a selfish, adulterous woman who would try to frame her own husband, and that she was no longer their daughter. They disowned her right there on the phone and hung up before she could say anything else. When she tried calling them back, they ignored every attempt. Later, when they returned home, not only was she gone, but she had trashed several things around their house. My mother-in-law was in tears over it. Despite all this, I still consider my ex-wife's parents to be my in-laws. They visit from time to see their grandkids, and they've been a real support. But as far as my ex is concerned, she's dead to all of us. Eventually, my wife came back with her affair partner to pack up more of her things. The affair partner wouldn't even step foot inside my house, and my wife didn't say a single word to me. I guess that was for the best. While my wife was gathering the last of her things, she knew there were cameras everywhere, so she didn't dare pull anything. I also wasn't alone. My sister and brother-in-law were there to help keep an eye on her. My brother-in-law stayed by the window, making sure to keep an eye on the affair partner, who didn't come inside. While she was still packing, the kids got home, but she didn't even attempt to speak to them, not even when our youngest cried for her. Before leaving, she did one last petty thing. She took some of the photos from our wedding off the wall and smashed them on the floor, probably hoping to get a reaction out of me. She stared right at me as she did it, but I didn't say a word. When I didn't give her the satisfaction of reacting, she just grabbed her bags and walked out the door. After she was gone, I called my elderly mother to come stay with me for a while because I couldn't manage everything on my own. I didn't have a lot of options for daycare, and I couldn't take much time off work, so her help was a godsend. Around that time, I also ordered DNA tests for my kids. Not because I doubted, but several people had advised me to do it just in case. Thankfully, both of my children are mine. I also got tested for STIs, and thankfully I was clean. About a week later, my wife showed up at my door again, trying to strike a deal. She offered to agree to a clean divorce if I did too, meaning she would get half of everything. I looked her dead in the eye and said no. We argued a bit, and she eventually admitted she'd learned the hard way that the laws in our state were not in her favor. We had met, gotten engaged, married, and lived our entire lives in this state, and there was no way she could get out of taking a major financial loss unless I agreed to settle, which I had no intention of doing. I told her she had betrayed me, our kids, her parents, and practically everyone else with her affair, then slammed the door in her face. She left quietly after that, and I didn't see her again until we went to court a few months later. By the time we showed up in divorce court, my wife was visibly pregnant. She had managed to get herself a lawyer, though the affair partner was nowhere to be found. I figured she would try to lie to the judge, and sure enough she did, at least at first. But I had enough video evidence to refute every lie she tried to tell, so she really didn't stand a chance. Instead, she shifted to dragging things out by refusing to cooperate and making ridiculous demands. She wanted most of my savings and a long list of items I owned. She even expected me to buy out her half of the house, even though she had never contributed a dime to the mortgage. On my end, I was fighting for full custody of the kids and to get her name off the house deed. I had video evidence of her saying she didn't care about the kids anymore and her willingness to make up lies to ruin me. That helped my case a lot. She kept stalling, changing her demands, but the judge wasn't having it. This being a no-fault state meant she was entitled to very little since she was the one who had cheated, and her attempts to frame me only made things worse for her. In the end, she lost all custody of the kids and walked away with nothing but her personal belongings and what could be considered a modest financial settlement, given the circumstances. The car I'd bought for her a couple of years ago was in my name, but I signed it over without a second thought as part of the settlement. She hadn't made any effort to speak to our kids throughout the entire divorce, so I ended up with full custody. The house is fully mine now, and I'm completely free of her. During and even before the divorce, my ex tried to keep up her lies, painting me as the villain. But my sister had already spread the word about my wife's infidelity, and once our mutual friends realized who was telling the truth, they all cut her off. After the divorce was finalized, my ex and her affair partner left town together. I heard he wasn't fired but transferred somewhere else where, I don't know, and frankly, I don't care. They could have shipped them both off to freezing Greenland for all I care. I'm just glad they're gone. By now, my ex should have had her do-over baby, and I hope it was worth it for her. This isn't the kind of story I expected to share on Reddit, especially after originally posting about something as small as my wife releasing a bunny where a hawk could get it. But many of the comments I received back then made me realize I'd missed the red flags all along. I guess I wore rose-colored glasses for most of our marriage, but it's all behind me now. Thank you to anyone who's made it this far. I know this was a lot to read, but this has been my life. Edit. I managed to get my ex's name off the house deed because all the bank records showed that I was the only one who ever paid into it. Plus, my ex was repeatedly combative with the judge, and in a no-fault state, being the confirmed cheater is like having a signed prenup working against you. When I said I got the meanest lawyer from the firm, I wasn't kidding. The guy was a mix of a bear and a shark. In the end, My ex walked away with $60,000 and the car I bought her a couple of years ago, which cost me $50,000. The car was paid off, so I just transferred the title to her. She was offered partial custody of the kids, but since that video of her saying she didn't care about them had been seen in court, she didn't even bother. She willingly gave up all rights to our children when she realized she couldn't get her way. And for those who think the police wouldn't have arrested her for lying, think again. The police in my area don't mess around. My ex tried to frame me as a wife beater with that sociopathic grin on her face, and that's more than enough reason for them to put her in handcuffs. MFX 3000 says, I think it's great that you're keeping your ex's parents in your life for the sake of your kids. Having their grandparents around will be a huge help, especially since they took your side right away. This must have been excruciating for them too. Incredible story. I can't even imagine the heartache you've been through, and the kids as well. Best wishes for you all moving forward. PureFeed 51002 adds. Totally agree with this. Your kids will definitely benefit from having their grandparents around, and I'm sure your in-laws are struggling too. Keeping them close is a great idea if you can. Divorce is never something to celebrate because nobody wants their marriage to end like this, but I am so glad for you, OP. Your ex sounds like an absolute witch, and she's finally getting what she deserves. Good riddance. Just focus on being a great dad to your kids. They need you more than ever right now. Your eldest is really sharp, and she's lucky to have you. Slants 420 says, how are your kids holding up? OP replies, the youngest struggled for a while, but the eldest handled it surprisingly well. They're both doing much better now, and I've found a regular babysitter they like. I'm so sorry this happened to you, and even more sorry that your ex said those horrible things about her own kids. No wonder your eldest felt like she needed to come to you about her mom's behavior. It's awful, but it just shows how much she trusts you. You're clearly an amazing father. It's heartbreaking that she felt such a disconnect from her own mother, but it's a testament to the strong bond she has with you. Slants 420 continues. I'm also glad you had the cameras around the house. Those really saved you. Your ex sounds like the kind of person who would have taken you down with her if she hadn't been caught. But in the end, she sank her own ship. It's sickening to think about what she's capable of. I really feel for you and your kids, OP. They deserved a mother who wanted to be there for them and, more importantly, wanted to be their mother. What a sad situation all around. Outro. Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any future stories. We'd hate for you to miss one. If you want to hear more stories, be sure to check out our lounge, where I feature a wider variety of stories that aren't cheating related. See you there.